Hi there, this is Camille Grand from Mayfield for another one of our podcasts, CXO of the Future, and I'm so honored to have Srini here today. Srini, thank you so much for joining us from your home there. It looks like you're not working in the office today, but Srini, you've got an amazing background. You're now running a major new initiative there at Rackspace, but you started your career in healthcare at IBM. You were doing research at NTT. So can you first introduce your current role and then tell us how you got started in your original job and why this perhaps had input on where you are today?
Yeah, Camille, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and it's been really good for my career and what I learned by spending time with you, with Mayfield Ventures, and what you guys do there is pretty amazing. So I'm really happy to be on the podcast. Now, I am today. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Rackspace, and in that role, I've got strategy, product, all of IT reports up through me. The information security function reports up through me. So think about it as the technology, strategy, and implementation arm within Rackspace. And recently, we'll come back to this a little later. We've spun up a new unit called FAIR, the Foundry for AI by Rackspace, FAIR.
Nice.
And I'm the founder and global head for FAIR, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later in the podcast.
So you started out of school at IBM, if I have that right. And maybe you could tell us, how did you land that job and why did you go into technology, and how maybe does that connect to where you are today?
Well, I think it's a case of where you followed your passion, right? I have always been someone who likes to solve problems, and what comes with problem solving is curiosity, right? I'm always growing up, I was one of these guys who always wondered about, you see something happening, and you're not kind of caught up with the outcome of it, but you're like, I wonder how they did that. Right, and that actually is a common theme that's kind of gone throughout my career, and technology was the right place to be. This for me, it was the mid '80s. I was in India. India hadn't gone through a lot of the revolution that you've seen over the last 20, 30 years, and we were learning on punch cards and COBOL and knockoffs of IBM mainframe that we got from the Russians. So it's fundamentally like how you learned, but it actually taught you quite a lot, because I had to learn how to bootstrap a TDC 316, which is a VAX 11 machine using an octal tape, right? And it's like, okay, so then you have to go back and say, wait a second, I wonder why they call that a bootstrap, and then you start learning those types of things. So technology was almost a natural fit for what I like to do. And if I kind of take one thread from the time I started to today, and that's that thread that's gone through, I'm a technologist at my core. That's it, right? I love technology. I love solving problems using technology. And that's what, if somebody just pulled me aside and said, bullet to your, a gun to your head, what is your core competency? That's it, right? And then everything in my career after that has been adjacencies that I've had to pick up to be able to function in multiple roles.
And your first role at IBM was exactly what? What was that first project you had to cut your teeth on?
At IBM, you got in there, I got my start writing the compilers and operating system, software. It's kind of where I got my start. But then if you kind of think about it, one of my earliest mentors was Nick D'Onofrio, who was the then CTO of IBM, and Nick was an amazing gentleman, and he always took technologies under his wing and cultivated them. And he gave me this perspective that, Srini, it's technology. Eventually, you have to kind of look for what use does it have for people. If it doesn't do that, then what's the point? And he put in place programs that took people out of research, put them into client engagements. He did a lot for IBM in the Gerstner days.
Yeah.
And I happened to be one of those guys who benefited from there. And so, moving from being a hardcore technologist I got the opportunity to go work on some of the more hardcore problems, right? And the hardcore problems sometimes were, IBM is doing the first version of this US Open website.
Yeah.
And this is in the late 90s. And how do we get it to scale, and handle that many transactions? Or it could have been, hey, we've got customer XYZ that we've signed a major Y2K deal and it's in the ditch. So can you go help
fix this?
Yeah. And again, I will tell you, I tell my kids this these days. I said, when you're going through it, you go like, why me? Why do they pick me? And then 20 years later, 25 years later, you look back and say, I'm glad they picked me, because that's kind of what built who I was. So IBM for me was a phenomenal experience, a great technology company. It still is a very good technology company. And spending time at IBM when Gerstner and Nick Donofrio and everyone was there was all about how do we make IBM relevant in those days with e-business and everything else. And so that was just it was a right place, right time thing for me.
Well, let's now talk about leadership. You've had some amazing leadership opportunities throughout your career. You currently in a very interesting new next generation thing. You learned some leadership, I presume, from Nick Donofrio, as you just described. You went on to lead as the CIO of Nationwide Insurance. You learned all about the insurance industry. You went on to global services at HP Enterprise for a while. You were president of NTT Research for a few years. Then you became CIO of Magellan Health. I mean, really amazing sort of career opportunities that you've had leadership around. I know you're on the board of a number of companies, leading sustainability.ai as a board member as well. Have you learned any particular leadership skill throughout all of that you think is one that people maybe should learn from?
A few, but if I had to narrow it down to a couple of lessons, right? It comes down to, the first one is never stop learning, right? This is a space that has evolved. I've been in this, as I said, from about the 1986 timeframe, 38 years or 37, 38 years in this industry. And I've seen technology change a few times. At the core, it is always about solving problems for people and continuing to use that. And I've seen a lot of people who got started kind of move away from that continuous learning approach. I think that has, for me, that's been unbelievably useful, because again, you talk about, I'm close to 60 years old, right? Go run the generative AI startup is not the normal thing that you would look at. But I feel like, again, I know it's just a cliche, age is just a number, but I feel age is just a number because pretty much everybody who's anyone in Gen AI has probably got 2 years of experience. Well, I've got the same 2 years. Yeah. Plus, I've got the benefit of 35 years of learning how to do things, but also learning how not to do things. So, so that continuous learner component of it is a very, very important piece of it. And I would tell people at any stage of their career that never give that up, because once you stop evolving, you go extinct, right? And that's the fastest way to do that.
I'm curious, Sri, how you afford time to do continuous learning. You've got a really heavy plate of responsibilities. Doing research and reading and staying up on content is an afforded time.
Right? I do a mix of things. When I'm doing my walks, I listen to podcasts, right? And I listen to podcasts, from different domains, right? I listen to Freakonomics radio podcasts, and as you're thinking about it, it's things that are adjacent to the work that I do, but it always kind of gets your mind thinking about, I wonder what if that applies in this space. That's one form of learning for me. I'm an audio learner. I'm not a visual learner, so I tend to listen to that. And then the other thing that I carve time for myself. You asked me about my weekend, and every weekend I try to go find 3 to 4 hours to go do some training, right? At least the 8 to 10, the last 5 or 10 years with the MOOCs, the massive curriculum. There's just so much at your fingertips.
So much content available.
Really, it's really more of you got to be very selective. And over the last 7 months, I'd say I've pretty much consumed everything related to AI, right? And just going in and, hey, Google came out with something, you go finish that. And then DeepMind.ai came out with something. Okay, let's go figure out what Andrew and others are saying about it, right? And you find out that when you make it that structured, the incremental learning becomes easy, right?
Yeah.
Like so I always get comments on my LinkedIn posting. How do you find the time to go get certified as a Azure certified?
There you go. Yeah. I was curious about that.
35 years of experience, right? So while technology has changed a lot, some of the things haven't changed. Plus, once like the first one is tough, but the second one and the third one is a game of association, right?
Yeah.
You kind of think through that. So it is just like saving for retirement, right? The money you save compounds, and it's the same thing from a learning standpoint. So that's my big learning on that front. The second lesson for me, which has been invaluable, I talked about Nick Donofrio, but the other gentleman that I consider a lifelong mentor for me is Mike Keller. He used to be the enterprise CIO at Nationwide. He was the guy who recruited me away from IBM to come to Nationwide. And he was, he's now on the board of a couple of insurance companies and others, like really. So I knew him at IBM. He brought me in, and the first 6 months, again, same thing. When they give you advice, you don't kind of realize how important it is. But then reflecting back, that's the big thing that you learn. So he came back after about 3 months of me trying to make things happen in a organization, a great organization like Nationwide, but they move at their own pace.
Yeah.
And he sat me down, and I still remember crystal clear. He said, like, Srini, you're used to running the Green Beret and the Delta Force at IBM, because everywhere you looked around, you had somebody who was as good as you, if not better than you. It's different when you're commanding the army, right? And he said it's actually different. You're going to have to learn additional skills. So not just being that technologist alone is not enough. You're going to have to figure out how to scale. How do you get work done through teams, with teams, and how do you bring people along, right? And again, as I said, that didn't resonate with me at that time. This is early 2000s, but as I went through working with him and in successive jobs, that I've seen has been a phenomenal lesson, because every single time you pick up something, and so, here's one piece. Like, I'm not going to use any of the words that are this, but I realized that there's, I'm one of those guys who actually goes and can drive a team to go take the hill.
Yeah.
And then once I took the hill, it'll be, what's the next hill I can go take?
Yes. Yeah.
I am not the person who'd sit there, smell the roses, and say, like, thank you, and those things. That doesn't come naturally to me. And earlier in the career, I would not apologize for it, but as I learned, it's kind of like, no, wait, I've got to surround myself with people who compliment me, not that reflect what I do. They compliment me. So I've had some amazing people that have worked for me, and they've worked for me repeatedly. And I had this, a really top-notch executive. Her name was Maria Urani. She's a CIO at TD Bank now. And she was on my team for a long time. And, when I used to go up on stage at Nationwide, she would sit in the first, second row or something and go like, okay, Srini, remember, smile. and remember to ABC, right? And so then when I got up there, that's the first thing that came in. Then it was not faked or any of those things. It was just my mind was thinking of something else. But then when you had the time to kind of go back in and reflect and talk about how much what those accomplishments meant, then you start to develop this persona. It's a real one, but it had to be learned. That I absolutely do care about people, but the way I used to show it 25 years ago is good. We took a major hill. Like let's go take another one to prove that we're best, right? And so that's a second lesson that I think has been invaluable to me.
So leading that army through that conviction and leveraging all your curiosity to be one step in front of a lot of things. That's
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
So we're at a pretty interesting time. Generative AI seems all the rage. My last question really is about predicting what should we be spending more time about. And I wonder if you could share a little bit about your view on generative AI and why you've launched this new program and why you think this is so critical.
Yeah. If I took a step back on that, I would say we're at the dawn of the age of AI, right? AI is 75 plus years old. 1956 was when the word term was coined. However, the tools, techniques, and everything else were complex enough that you needed some really smart people to be able to pull these together, so you could never scale, right? This is the same, Green Beret versus Army analogy. And where we are, and I think what generative AI and more specifically large language models have taught us, and the tooling that's come with it, is you're starting to democratize these tools. You're starting to get it to a point where I really don't need to know. I need to know that there are people who are doing parameter efficient function, the feature tuning, but I don't have to understand the math behind it. Right? But I can benefit from PEF, like in my so if you think about it, Camille, I talk to people about it as the Maslow's hierarchy of technology. I don't have to worry about food, shelter, clothing anymore. I can start thinking
keep stepping up the notches.
Getting up higher into that self-actualization on that front. And I think I just said it's the start of that age of AI, right? So I think that is exciting for me. So I'm not going to say generative AI and chat GPT. You can listen to that any place, but I look at the overall pattern and go, that's amazing, right? So the thing that I would like to, and it's one of the core tenets of what we're trying to do with FAIR at Rackspace, is how do you guide the responsible use of AI, right? Those are things like as an example, I talk about it in 3 S's. I believe AI, for it to be responsible, has to be symbiotic. It has to coexist with people. It can't supplement. It can't replace people. It has to augment them.
Right.
And coexistence really works both ways. It's not just AI that doesn't harm people, but it is people who start considering AI as coworkers, right?
Yes.
And so, just like when you're building a team, there's teamwork, there's forming, storming, norming, everything you have to do.
Yep.
Well, we're going to have to kind of figure out how you co-work. If your coworker is AI, like a co-pilot, a duet, whatever it is you want to use.
Right. The collaborative, right.
Yeah. How's that going to change the dynamics of it? So the symbiotic nature of it is pretty important. I do believe that making sure that it is secure is important. Secure meaning it's safe for individuals, the data is protected. You do it in such a way that privacy, copyright laws, everything else are respected. Because if you don't do secure, you're not going to be symbiotic with humans. Like case in point, the actor strike that's going on right now, and the writer strike that's going on right now. And then the third S for me is then it needs to be sustainable. And for sustainable, it is really, again, a development of a new set of skills. You can say things like, I got to eliminate bias and all of those other pieces. But the simplest way I look at it is, in order for AI to function and continue to improve and get better, it needs to have a supply chain of AI data. It has to come from multiple sources. It's going to be learning from that. Ensuring the integrity and the accuracy of that supply chain of data is a big part of sustainability, because if you're ingesting data only from biased sources, well, obviously you're AI. The same way, just like with any supply chain, you have inspections, right? So having the supervised learning with human feedback types of mechanisms that allow you to really make sure that those principles of responsible AI, that AI always stays symbiotic, it's secure, and it's sustainable. And that's how you move up that Maslow's hierarchy, right? So
I love it.
That's the way I tend to look at it. I think you've got really smart people looking at and continuing to build the tooling and others that's going to make it better and better. And I'm always amazed at, oh, Llama 2. Well, let me go figure out how they did that, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's awesome. I think, with those smart people looking at it, I think you need equally smart people and committed people looking to how it gets applied in day-to-day life. And that's kind of where we're coming at it from.
Yeah, love it. The 3 S's of generative AI.
Yeah, well, it needs to be those three. Only then does it benefit humanity in general.
Yeah, wonderful. So Sri, thank you so much for doing this podcast with us. Just any closing comments, any words to live by that you want to share with the audience?
I think the lessons that I learned over my career are still very valid for people. Just know that it's even more important that you continue to learn these days. Mm-hmm. I have a 31-year-old daughter and a 24-year-old daughter, and I just told them, congratulations, you graduated from the University of Michigan.
Oh, nice.
You're going to have to keep learning, right? Yep, because everything you learn is going to change in the next few years.
That's right.
If they build continuous learning as a habit, I think people will be fine, because that's the amazing part of human beings. You can continue to learn and evolve. And that piece is the advice I give people, because I think we're in for some exciting times. As always, technology can also be used for bad things, and we're going to see some of those things come through as well. But I'm an eternal optimist, right? I'm a glass half full guy. I absolutely do believe that good will overcome.
Optimistic, curious, and a continuous learner. Love those bylaws to live by. So Srini, thank you so much for being our special guest today. This is Camille Gran here at Mayfield for CXO of the Future podcast. Sri, thanks once again.
Thank you, Camille.